Good morning, students. This is Asha, your social science teacher. So today here we are here with our second lecture on chapter 1 in history, tracing the changes through the past. So before we start, let's do a recap what we did yesterday. We did a brief introduction of history and division of history into prehistory and post-history. Then we did a further division of history, ancient, medieval and modern. And then we started with the chapter, and that was, we traced the changes in different things. The first change we studied was in the art of map making. The second change we discussed was about old and new terminology, how the same word had a different meaning then and have a different meaning now. And the third thing which we discussed was sources of history. We discussed about archaeological sources and literary sources. Now we will discuss further the literary sources. There are many types of literary sources like letters, teaching of saints, manuscripts, petitions, judicial record, holy text, chronicles. All these are literary sources, right? And now we'll discuss manuscripts in detail. So what exactly manuscripts are? Manuscripts are handwritten composition on a paper, bark, cloth, metal, palm, leaf or any other material. These are handwritten things on a paper, bark or cloth. These manuscripts were placed in library as well as archive. Children, do you know what is archive? Archive is a place where old documents are kept and preserved. Manuscripts and documents were rich and vital source of information for historians. So if you read these manuscripts or the documents, they give a great deal of information about past. Manuscripts were difficult to use and preserve, right? So it was a difficult task. As you know, these were handwritten either on paper, bark, cloth. At times when paper was not invented, these manuscripts were written on paper and at times on palm leaf as well. So it was a kind of a difficult thing to use as well as preserve. And scribes were the people who copied these manuscripts. Nowadays you have photocopy machine where you can easily get a copy. You do get a copy of a version, like you can get photocopied many things. But in earlier days there was no printing machine, so getting a copy was a difficult task. For that particular purpose, scribes were employed, and the main function of these scribes was to copy the manuscript. Suppose a chronicler or a court poet has written something, the scribes will copy and produce more copies for it. So there was specialized person for copying this. But there was a problem. Most manuscripts there were a lot of difficulties historian faced using these manuscripts. We'll discuss it. Before that, we would like to discuss what exactly were there in these manuscripts. Most of the manuscripts were written in Arabian or Persian, and the different kinds of handwritings was used for reading and writing. So the one was Nastaliq style, and it was cursive and easy to read, and the second was Shikasta style, which was denser and more difficult to read. I'll show you the picture of Nastaliq and Shikaste. Yes, you can see this was a Nastaliq style, which was cursive and neat and clean, and this was a Shikaste style, which was denser and difficult to read. So these were the two main handwriting style in which manuscripts were written. Now these manuscripts were written, but there were a lot of difficulties while reading this manuscript. When historians study these manuscripts, they find a lot of difficulties. So we'll see what all the difficulties they face. The first thing, scribes introduced numerous changes in the manuscripts while copying because of legible handwriting, personal biases, and misinterpretation and exaggeration of fact. So at times the scribes were given a task of copying a original manuscript. At times, if they do not understand the handwriting, they wrote whatever they understood. And when the second scribe is copying, again if he faced the same problem, he would write what he understood. In this way, when one particular manuscript was copied 6 times, the 6 new changes occurred. Like, I'll give you an example of your homework. Suppose you have done a homework and your handwriting is not that good and your friend copies from it. If he do not understand, he will write or make some changes according to him, whatever he understood. And the third friend, when he copies, he will also make some changes. In the way, when the last person who is copying, your answer and his answer will be quite different, because every person has made a bit of changes according to his or her understanding. That was the one problem. The second problem was personal biases. These poets, these all manuscripts were written by rich and mostly kings, rulers or nawabs. So they were employed to write. So they have to write good things only. They cannot always write truth. Anyways, they have to make their employer happy. Right? So while writing, we cannot trust them fully because they are fully influenced by personal biases. Next is misinterpretation. Handwriting was a problem plus interpretation. Suppose I am writing a particular thing. I want to convey a different message, but a simple mistake or simple change by the second person can get a wrong meaning. And the third is exaggeration of facts. At times, to make their employer happy, they exaggerated the facts, especially when they are writing about wars. They wrote as if he is the only sole ruler and the other side ruler was of no power. They exaggerate the things while writing. So yes, it is a bit difficult to get information because most of the time they are exaggerated, misinterpreted, and personal biases is strongly there in most of the manuscripts. A small but significant changes grew over centuries of copying until manuscripts of the same text become substantially different. Suppose I'll give you an arbitrary example. The Mughal dynasty ruled India for almost 4 centuries. Sir Babur employed a chronicler or a court poet to write histories. He has written. Then his son employs and he asks him to copy the first one and then start processing. Like if these copying work goes on till the generation of Aurangzeb, who was in 17th century, and Babur, who was in 15th century, within the 200 years of time, the copying thing, because we did not have a printing machine, so it's the work of scribe to copy. While copying, there would be a lot of changes from the first person who wrote till the last person, and they become substantially different. Right? The original manuscripts are rarely found. As a result, historians have to read different manuscript versions of the same text to guess what the author originally wrote. This is one of the great points. And the true original manuscripts, if you want, you will hardly find them. Hardly they are found. So, if an historian is studying these manuscripts, so he has to read all the manuscript, all the copy versions to get onto the conclusion. Because if he read the second one and then he read the seventh, he will not be able to come onto a particular conclusion unless and until he reads all the copies available. Original are very difficult to find, but whatever copies of that particular manuscripts are available, historians have to read all of them to get or to reach on to conclusion. So these were the few difficulties which historians faced while studying or reading manuscripts. Now we'll discuss some interesting facts about manuscripts. Do you see, there is a sudden increase in written documents after 12th century, and it is due to invention of paper. So we do get a lot of literary sources after 12th century, and the reason is obviously the invention of paper. And it's a 14th century chronicler Ziauddin Barani wrote his chronicle first in 1356 and another version 2 years later, 1358. And the interesting thing is that both these versions was written by Ziauddin Barani in 1356 and 1358, and they both are not same. They are very different, and they don't refer from each other. But historian did not know about the existence of first until 1960. It remained lost in large library collection. So we were getting information or interpreting history from his writings of 1358. The original one which he wrote in 1356 was found in 1960s, and if you correlate, they were quite different from each other. Now that was the changes in sources of history. Now let's move on to the next change, which is technological changes. As the name of the chapter suggests, tracing the changes through past, we have traced the changes in maps, new and old terminology, sources of history, manuscripts. There were a lot of changes in manuscripts, plus there was a great deal of changes in the field of technology. The one is spinning wheel. It was used in making cloth. Invention of spinning wheel revolutionized the textile industry. The same thing was Persian wheel. Persian wheel was used in agriculture for irrigation. It helped irrigation in a great deal. The third is firearm combat. Firearm was earlier not used in battles, but with the invention of firearm, it became very crucial and a decisive factor for winning a battle for any ruler. So all these inventions, spinning wheel, Persian wheel, firearm, all these changes, all these technological changes came in medieval period. And yes, there were a lot of changes in food habit also. New food crops like potato, corn, tea, chilies, they were not produced in India. They came in India from West, from Arabs. So these were the changes in food habits of Indians. Okay, so children, let's recap what we studied today, and in third lecture tomorrow we'll discuss further. So we studied technological changes, spinning wheel, Persian wheel, firearm combat, interesting facts about manuscripts, difficulties in studying manuscripts and what exactly manuscripts are, and the maps and other things. That all we studied. That's all for the today's lecture, and tomorrow in the third lecture we'll study about emergence of new group and religions. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you.